Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America and the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. As mentioned, our guest is Dr. Leah Hollis, author of the book Bully in the Ivory Tower, How Aggression and Incivility Erode American Higher Education. Dr. Hollis, welcome to the program. Pleasure to have you with us.
Great to be with you today.
So many things to talk about in the program, and we'll start with the Rutgers situation. And I mentioned in the beginning you have a unique perspective on that because you were a varsity collegiate athlete at Rutgers. You served as director of academic support services when all that hit at Rutgers. And boy, it's all, every time you picked up even a newspaper, the news section as opposed to the sports section, for 3-4 days, that's all you talked about. And there was this great discussion about bullying in athletics in the country. What were your thoughts when that story broke?
I hate to say it, but nothing new under the sun. I mean, I come from college athletics. I find amateur sports to be a wonderful way to train young people to be responsible and competitive in a healthy way. However, keep in mind that coaches, not just Rutgers, we're talking across the country. Coaches are hired for win-loss records. They're hired to win. So some of the tapes that we saw in Mike Rice, sure, he had some very aggressive practice sessions with charging in the paint, the kinds of things that student athletes need to do when they're driving for a basket. That makes sense. Somewhere in there, he crossed the line. What's unfortunate is that bullying is still legal. At the K through 12 level in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, what have you, it's illegal. But once you cross into college, bullying is legal. And also in the workplace, bullying is legal. So a lot of folks wanted to come after the AD and Rutgers and legal counsel, say, why didn't you do anything about Mike Rice? Well, if they didn't have a policy in place to stem bullying, and there isn't a legislation out there prohibiting bullying, like prohibiting discrimination or harassment, they kind of didn't have a leg to stand on at that historical moment. So I kind of understand what happened. It was like the perfect storm, and it's unfortunate.
You mentioned so many things that are interesting there, and let's go back and talk a little bit about crossing the line. Can you define harassment and bullying, and where is that line that everybody said he seemed to cross that line? Is this a black and white issue?
There are two different terms you just threw out. Harassment, which is a Title VII, 1964 civil rights legal term, which is based on protected class, your race, your gender, religion, pregnancy, those types of things. Those are protected classes. And if I feel I'm being mistreated because of my membership in one of those protected classes, that is illegal. The other term you used was bullying. Bullying is still legal. Bullying, by definition, a number of studies talks about it's systemic. It happens over a period of time. It includes insults and making people feel bad. And it's not because you're black or because you're white or because of your age. It's because one person has power over another and abuses that power over the subordinate. So in the case with Mike Rice, he has the power. His student athletes do not have the power. And it's happening over a period of time. The way he was treating them, which was outside the bounds of an aggressive practice session, which included the homophobic slurs, including throwing the ball in their face, including some other physical aggression, which goes outside of an aggressive practice session, and it happened over a period of time, that's where he wandered into abuse and bullying.
So many people, when they said, I wonder how the athletes take that. And then we heard some athletes, and some of those were basically saying it's no big deal. We understand what the coach was trying to do. He's trying to make us better. When they said that, was that coming from a place of fear because they're on scholarship? They want to jump on the guy. They want to say anything negative about the school. Or was that acceptance of bullying? Were you surprised at the athletes' reaction?
No, not at all. Athletics is aggressive. I mean, student athletes want to win too. It was interesting. The Rutgers case broke right around March Madness in the Final Four. And so if you looked at the commercials of young men and young women with teeth bared and fists clenched and that type of thing, well, aggression is accepted and almost expected in a very impassioned athletic contest. Also keep in mind, these young men and women are anywhere between 18 and 22, 23 years of old. So they're kind of ratting out their coach, if you will. This is a parental figure. A lot of young people are leaving their homes, leaving parents and school systems and coming to coach. Student athletes come to school because of one of two things, because of the campus, the education, and because of the coach. And if they don't like the coach or they can't get along with the coach, they're going to leave. That's how they're paying for school. So it's also unlikely for a student athlete who's in a parental situation to step forward and say, hey, my coach is abusing me. Just like a lot of young people don't step up and talk about how their parents are abusing them. So I'm not surprised. I believe that athletics really does encourage us to be aggressive. Some of that aggression is warranted because you want to win. The world is a very competitive place. Being assertive and aggressive is not always a bad thing. But in this situation, he blurred the line. I don't care how aggressive and assertive you want to be. Don't throw the ball in my face. You don't have to abuse me and call me names. That's out of bounds.
We talked before about, you brought up the wins, losses, and that's how these people are graded, and they're not kept around if they'll get a buyout, but they're not kept around if they don't produce, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars here. Does the high expectations play into this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm originally from Ohio, and there are two win-loss records out there in Ohio. There's your Big Ten record. There's your record against Michigan. You have to,
exactly.
You have to,
yes.
You're in Indiana. You understand what I'm talking about, Big Ten country. So you have to win. I mean, that's where the boosters dollars comes from, and that alumni love comes from, and that's where all of these really wonderful experiences come from. Do rally around athletics. But it requires a win. It requires a winning season. So it's kind of this oxymoron, the student athlete, the student who's supposed to be in class and studying and learning languages and calculating pi. But the athlete part is flying around the country and missing exams and, having, problems with their papers because they're spending so much time practicing. As a college athlete whose season starts in the fall is going to see that playbook before they see a college book or a notebook. It's kind of an oxymoron, and that's how we built it. I mean, we want to get upset about Rutgers and Mike Rice, but the truth of the matter is we as a society demand that. We like seeing the fight at the hockey game. We like smash mouth football. We like aggression in our sports. We as a society. So when it kind of blurs itself in the college area and he was caught on tape, he got caught with his hand in a cookie jar, I would say.
It's interesting when you mentioned Ohio State football. John Cooper would be a lifetime football coach at probably any other school in the country because he couldn't beat Michigan. He's now an ex-Ohio State football coach. So the expectations are so high. Our guest on the program is Dr. Leah Hollis. The book is called Bully in the Ivory Tower, How Aggression and Incivility Erode American Higher Education. Her website is diversitytrainingconsultants.com. Time going quickly, so much to talk about on the program. As I'm watching everything unfold in Rutgers, I'm thinking, why do we tolerate that in athletics when it would never be tolerated in other departments at the university? And then I pick up bullying in the ivory tower, and I'm thinking it is tolerated in other departments in the university. You've got a study that you quoted here. In fact, you did your own study we'll talk about. What 62% of people in higher education have witnessed or been a victim of bullying in the past year and a half. And that's higher than the general workplace.
Yes. Higher education is built on being the smartest guy in the room. So we go to school, as I did. Go to school, you become an expert in your field and you get grants and you have this really awesome ego and you produce all this wonderful scholarship. That kind of training doesn't lend itself to collaborative leadership. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to team building. It lends itself to a bit of an egocentric way of working. And if you look at the leadership in higher education, it tends to revolve around our academic leaders. Our academic leaders have written books and have done studies and have discovered and taught some very wonderful things. However, that does not necessarily translate into I'm a great leader. The other thing, too, the tenure track process, which I do respect if you know the history of academic freedom and why that was necessary, it protected scholarship. It protected intellectual curiosity. It protects people's jobs. It also protects you to a point that you can be a bully and get away with it. So anything can be taken to an extreme and abused. And in this particular case, higher education does have some systems and structures in it that allow bullies to flourish just a little bit more. Seeking tenure is just as competitive intellectually as it is trying to go out there and win basketball games and football games. So it's kind of inbred in our intellectual pedigree, if you will, in higher education.
And it's taking its toll financially at a time here in the Midwest. You've got universities saying we cannot keep raising tuition. We've got to start making dramatic cuts and millions of dollars in cuts. And you point out that you've got about 16% of people have actually left the job in higher education because
Yeah.
of bullying.
Yes.
16%. That has to
Yeah.
take its toll financially.
Well, let's go on a little bit further. I have people in the study who comment they spend on average 3.9 hours per week, half a day per week, dealing with a bully that is disengaged, took sick time, twiddling their thumbs at their desk, talking to mom, dad, spouse because they've been bullied. So now we're talking about 2 days a month. We're now talking about 24 days a year. We're talking about 5 weeks lost in productivity because somebody's recoiling and regrouping after dealing with the bully. So take that person's salary weekly, and let's suppose the person is making $50,000, you just threw away roughly $9,600 in lost wages because of somebody having to recoil and regroup after being the target of a bully. Now let's look at this number exponentially. You take that $9,600, let's suppose even across 10 or 15% of your staff. All of a sudden, you have all this money that's being lost in lost productivity instead of solving problems, recruiting students, increasing retention, solving the problems that we have in higher education. Instead, we put people psychologically and emotionally in a position to literally lick their wounds to deal with the bully who just berated them openly in a staff meeting, through cyber mail, or in front, and even in front of students, as happened in reported in the study.
With the extensive study that you've done, other studies that are in the marketplace, and the book Bully in the Ivory Tower, How Aggression and Incivility Erode American Higher Education, is this now a wake-up call? What kind of response are you getting? Because it's alarming when you read this. That I guess we tend to think that bullying probably stops at the end of secondary education. At that point, it's over with. But what happens, I guess, is if we don't stop it at that level, they just go on and perpetrate it in the workplace, in this case, in higher education.
Sure, bullies grow up and they grow
Well,
up.
yeah, exactly.
They bully in college. Unfortunately, again, this happened at Rutgers, the issue with the Tyler Clemente case. That was a bullying situation. Bullies grow up, go through college. They go and get MBAs and PhDs and EDDs and all of that, and they move on, and they take that behavior with them. If a bully has been successful with bullying tactics as a child and in their college years, they're certainly going to take those bullying and aggressive tactics on into their workplace. And if they continue to be rewarded and championed for whatever it is that they're doing, there's no reason for them to break that cycle. Absolutely. You asked me the question, the response that the book is getting. It's been reviewed by the Chronicle of Higher Education. It's been reviewed by University Business. I've done a number of radio shows and have done some interviews with Fox News on the topic. Very quietly, people are taking notice on how much it costs, how pervasive it is. A number of places already knew that workplace bullying was at roughly around 37%, as quoted by NAMI and NAMI in their 2007 study. But to come to terms with this is happening in higher education at an even higher rate. And higher education was always supposed to be that wonderful ivory covered tower and a really nice, cushy place to work. And it turns out to be a more aggressive place to work. And I'm disappointed in that, as I'm a child of higher education. I grew up on a college campus. I never left. So I was very saddened to find out the results of this study that bullying in higher education really is much more pervasive than any of us had originally considered.
You're listening to This Week in America. Our guest on the program is Dr. Leah Hollis, author of the book Bully in the Ivory Tower. Her website is diversitytrainingconsultants.com. Of course, you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link up with Dr. Hollis's website, get information on the book. Time going too quickly, several minutes left in the program. And this is interesting that you're bringing up now, and it wasn't that long ago where we went through a situation where we saw in Penn State, they had problems that went on for years, and they were met in most cases with silence.
Sure.
Is there something there that we should take a look and go, wait a minute, silence is not going to solve this problem. We really need to get out in front of it.
I believe in Penn State. I'm a Pennsylvania kid. So it was very sad to see that story unfurl. It was very sad to see how many people had come forward and said that they had been the victim of Sandusky. However, I also understand with college sports, you kind of keep it quiet. There are things, when things come up, I guess it's like working in the police force. You keep things quiet. And so unfortunately, when people started coming forward and reporting this, the court cases are saying that, yeah, they passed the buck and one person passed it to another person who passed it to another person. And unfortunately, what was happening is that the young people caught in the crosshairs continually face this kind of abuse. Jerry Sandusky was literally a demagogue at Penn State. I mean, it is a wonderful place to be on a Saturday afternoon and all the blue and white. And so to think that one of our heroes was abusing young boys is just something that really reeled the state and the nation. So when people came forward and started reporting, you don't want to believe it. The administration didn't want to believe it. I think Joe Paterno reported it up line and kind of passed off probably a little too quickly. He regrets. I read reports he had regretted not doing more. But I also think that's part of that code that happens in cliquish type of organizations, whether it's athletics or fraternities or police or what have you. There are sometimes you just keep quiet, and unfortunately the youngest person in it is left being abused. How that translates to bullying, you could say the same thing, where somebody is continuously bullied because of their race or their sexual orientation or because of what have you. But because the organization is so busy trying to protect itself and protect its self-image, may be less likely to move forward and deal with the bully because he's the leader, because he's the vice president, because he's the head coach, because he brought in millions of dollars in grants. The organization sometimes is willing to turn its head. And so that would be the loose connection in the athletic scandals between what happened at Penn State, which was just horrible, and even what happened at Rutgers, is that institutions really try to handle things internally. The fallout from Penn State is a number of people broke their letters of intent. That kind of thing really can destroy a program. So understanding how Rutgers officials might think, or any official from athletics, you don't want it out that your coach is abusing people. You don't want it out that your coach is a diabolical bully. You try to handle it internally, and that's what they did, and it came out to bite them. That's what happened. So I understand. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I say I do understand the logic behind the organizational behavior.
Would love to have Dr. Hollis back on the program. So many more things to talk about. It's a fascinating book, and we've talked about the problems. You also offer a number of solutions, and next time maybe we'll talk about what needs to be done to rectify the situation. The book is called Bully in the Ivory Tower, How Aggression and Incivility Erode American Higher Education. Dr. Leah Hollis has been our guest on the program. Her website is diversitytrainingconsultants.com. Of course, like I said, you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on and get all that information. Fascinating book, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
You're listening to This Week in America and the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.